Hello everyone, and welcome back. So today I would like to talk about Plato's dialogue called Charmides, or Temperance. So as you know, I'm reading through the great books of the Western world, as I introduced recently in another video, and I'm working through volume 7 right now, which is Plato. And this contains the dialogues of Plato and the 7th letter. And to date, I have read the first 5 dialogues that are in this book. And today, so we'll go over Charmides a little bit. So this is going to be a little bit of a spoiler if you've never read Plato before. So I just want to give you that warning. You can stop the video and come back to it later after you've read it. But I just want to talk about this a little bit. So this is the first one I've ever read. Didn't know what I was getting into. Never read Plato before in my life. Not a stitch of it. Didn't know what to expect. And this was very interesting. I found this to be quite an engaging conversation that through Socrates, Plato has about temperance. And so if you remember the book How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler, and Mortimer Adler is one of the editors of this set of books, he discusses 4 questions that must be asked of every book. And I thought, rather than just reading that book and put it back on the shelf and just check mark, a box saying, yeah, I've read How to Read a Book. Let's actually put into practice some of that book's instruction. And so there are 4 questions we want to ask of every book. And it is, what is the book about as a whole? And how does it say what it says in detail? Is it true? And then what of it? So let's just start with what is the dialogue, because this isn't an entire book, this is just a dialogue, but it's a self-contained unit. So what is the dialogue as a whole about? Well, it's about temperance, which would seem obvious. And then the second thing that it does is how to evaluate what we know. So Socrates exhibits the Socratic method. And just a little aside, I'm a big fan of the movie Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. It's really hard not to say Socrates every time we mention Socrates, but it would be done affectionately, not to mock the man. But the next question that we want to ask in this evaluation of a book is, how does it say what it says in detail? And I thought the best way to approach that would be to write out a outline of the dialogue. And so we have the introduction. We're setting the scene. Socrates has been away with the army. Socrates is visiting his old haunts, and he meets some men he knows. And then we come down and we talk about Charmides. Charmides is said to be very beautiful, both inside and out. He's this young man, and Socrates actually wonders about Charmides' soul's beauty. And Charmides complains of a headache. Socrates apparently has the cure, or he's going to say that he has the cure. He's talked into saying he has the cure. Now Charmides sits down next to Socrates. Now this is important. So keep in mind, I'm coming from a Christian perspective. But we can read things and just engage with what it says on its own terms, right? Or else we're going to shut our brains off. We don't want to do that. Socrates is attracted to Charmides. Charmides is a young man, remember. And he sits down next to Socrates. Socrates must control his own appetite here, or else he would devour Charmides. So he has to keep his own appetite in check. The headache cure that Socrates has 2 parts. It comes from a kind of a leaf. So there's a physical medicinal item that we have. And then there's a charm. Some words need to be spoken. And then we're reminded of this saying that I've never heard this saying before, but this is interesting, from the Thracian king, who says that you ought not to attempt to cure the eyes without the head, or the head without the body. So neither ought you to cure the body without the soul. I think that's very interesting, taking this approach of a person is not just, who has a headache. It's not just their head. There's more to that person than just that. And that's what Socrates is interested in investigating with Charmides. And then the charm is supposed to bring out temperance in the patient. So if temperance is the cure for the soul, then it will be the cure for the body, and then the head and the eyes, of course, will be taken care of. But if Charmides already has temperance, then he won't need this charm from Socrates. So Socrates has to evaluate Charmides and decide if he does have temperance or not. So then we get down to a matter of definitions here. Socrates, Charmides, and Critias work through the various definitions of what temperance might be. But all the suggested definitions are kind of ridiculous, right? One of the things that I appreciate that Socrates does in this dialogue is a possible definition is proposed, and what he does immediately is looks for a way to falsify that definition. So we don't waste time getting stuck with a false definition and then developing ideas from that. And then when you later on find out that it's falsified, well, then you've wasted all this time. Socrates wants to save time by just trying to falsify it immediately. And there's some wisdom there, I think, in that. And then we come down to wisdom. The men in the discussion seem to settle on temperance having something possibly to do with wisdom. And there also seems to be a connection to knowledge of good and evil. Well, as a reader, I'm thinking, well, I'm getting close. And this is one thing I do want to say. For a couple of seconds, I was tempted to run to the dictionary, the English dictionary, and look up temperance just to make sure I understood temperance. And then I remembered the wisdom of Mortimer Adler in his book, How to Read a Book, is good authors, great authors, will tell you what they mean by certain terms that they use. And they'll tell you even how to read their own writings. And so I wanted to take that to heart. I really wanted to apply that. I knew immediately, I can't run to the dictionary. This is ancient Greece. I've got to let Plato tell me what he means by temperance. And then we end up with this violent conspiracy. Critias urges Charmides to be charmed by Socrates daily to ensure that he has temperance, because it's figured out that Charmides probably doesn't have temperance. Socrates notes that he wasn't asked about whether or not he wanted to be a participant in that. And so he says, will you arrange this, will you enforce this arrangement by violence? And they say that they will use violence if Socrates resists. And Socrates vows not to resist. There seems to be some humor there. I don't think it's meant to be deadly serious, that part. But the dialogue ends without telling you what temperance is, because Plato's point is not to tell you, the reader, what temperance is, so you can write it down in your notebook and then off you go. Now I have a definition of temperance. No, Plato wants the reader to think through what temperance is. And so we come to the next question that we must ask of a reading. Is the dialogue true? And I said mostly. Temperance is modeled by Socrates in this dialogue. It is the applied knowledge of good and evil exhibited as self-control in this case. And so what Socrates did was he had an appetite for this young man, and he was able to ignore his appetite, put it aside, because he knew he would devour the young man. He didn't want to be the cause of the young man's ruin. And so he put that aside. And so to apply such knowledge in this way is to be wise. And then so in this dialogue, as I understand it, wisdom is the applied knowledge of good and evil, wherein one chooses good instead of evil. Okay, well, the next question is, what of it? Well, I should seek to exercise temperance. And then I should analyze definitions by looking for what conditions would falsify the definition at hand. Often, I'll be writing an essay for myself, for my own interest, and I'll try to define some terms. And I need to make sure that the terms that I'm using have a reasonable definition. And to do that is I can try to falsify, like which situations would make this definition false. So I just found that to be very useful. And there's a couple other ideas in the dialogue that I found intriguing. Can I recognize virtue in someone else, even if I don't have that virtue? Because that is one of the conditions of this discussion, one of the concerns that comes up. And then the body can't be treated without the soul. I thought that was very interesting. So this is my first foray into Plato. And I'm assuming that if you've listened this far in the video, you've read Charmides as well. So if I'm way off base, feel free to say as much in the comments and share your own thoughts about your reaction to reading Charmides and your response to it. And I believe that's all I have to say for now, but I just wanted to share that with you. This is a really interesting dive into Platonic philosophy. And I'm looking forward to going over some more with you. I do have notes on the next 4 dialogues. As I had mentioned, I've read the first 5 in this book. But that's all for now. Have a great day.